If you're like me, you dread seeing 6-6 from the bar when you dance. You can't stand it when your opponent rolls a double one early in the game or a double six early in the game. There's there's many times where you're going to be very much afraid of him rolling a 1-6 from the bar. There are certain rolls at certain times that you just hate to see. Well, 5-2 is high on my list. In the early game, 5-2 just seems to be pretty much of a worthless roll. I just don't like it. 5-1 is also pretty bad, but often you can do something decent with the 1. 5-1, of course, would not be bad here because you can hit your opponent off of the bar point. But this is just the second roll of the game, and blue has opened with a 6-4 and made a very common play of coming out and down. And you have the 5-2. How do you play it? What can you do productive? This illustrates something that I think is so common in all of us. When we have a play, a roll that gives you 3 or 4 choices, and they all do something productive and something that you think is good, it's kind of fun to decide, ooh, should I make my 5-point or hit twice? Or should I make the prime or go for the closeout? Those are fun, interesting things to do. But when you have a play where everything looks lousy, it's not so much fun. It's painful. It's much harder to decide which is the best play from a bunch of bad plays than which is the best play from a bunch of good ones. There is no really good play here with 5-2. So you can bring the 5 down and stack it. You can split it right into his power, which lots him point on you with several rolls and hit you with several rolls. This is stacking and not giving you much of an extra builder. We've learned that when your opponent brings a checker to his 9-point early in the game, that he has a terrific number of great rolls next time. For example, with this spare, he can make this point with a 6-2 or a 2-1. He can make this point with a 4-1 or a 4-3. He can make this point with a 5-4 or a 5-2. Or he can just make the 9-point, which is also a valuable point. This spare here should set off alarms. It's even right with a double 2 in this position to hit this checker, which you would usually not think about doing anything with a double 2 other than making some points, making your 4-point and either coming up or down usually on the second roll. So here we are with him having this great builder here, and we are able to do something about it. And we are able to do something that's kind of productive with this roll after all. And most people don't even think of this play, and that's hitting off the ace point. And Extreme Gammon will verify with its rollout that it's right by a lot. The second best play is .056, which is a huge difference on the second roll. Hitting off the ace point, now you can come up without too much fear of being pointed on here. You'd have to roll doubles to point on you. Yes, he can hit you twice with a 1-something, but it's early in the game, and you are taking away half of his roll. We don't love this checker on the ace point. And on your next roll, once you slot the ace early in the game, we used to leave it open all the time and try to recirculate it, and now we've learned that quite often it's right to go ahead and make it and have the ugly ace point game. Now we're forced to play a game where we know we're not going to have a very good priming option. Once you make your ace point, it's pretty hard to prime, and we're pretty much committing to playing a hitting or a racing game and not trying to prime our opponent. It changes the whole course of the game. It's ugly. I almost hope we do get hit back in these situations. It's not so bad. In fact, if he rolls a 3-1, I smile. I'm so thrilled that he has to use his 3-1 to hit me instead of making this point, or a 4-1 instead of making his 5-point. So I've duplicated his ones. I've stopped him from having all this activity, and I've done something kind of productive. If I get hit with this split, I've got a lot of ways to make his 5-point, make a high anchor, come in and hit him back here maybe, depending on where the checkers are, come in and hit him back here. He's not going to clean up everything unless he rolls double ones or some kind of doubles or something. So most of the time I'm going to be shooting at him or making an advanced anchor or doing something relatively productive. It isn't great. You can see that right off the bat. You are an underdog in this game. After on the second roll, he's already a 55-45 favorite. So it isn't a great position to be in. And that's another thing. Really great players, when they're getting killed and they're losing, try just as hard to maximize their winning equity as when they're winning. It's just as important to, if you can make a play that's 5% better when you only have 10% in the game, in the overall scheme of things, that's the same as making a play that's 5% better when you're 90% in the game. So every play stands on its own to try and maximize your equity, and this is the best way. And if you understand it, if you can remember, you're more likely to remember this play. I don't teach rote memory. I don't say, okay, on the second roll after a 6-4, you should hit with the 5-2. Remember that. It's much easier to remember it and much more productive to go through the reasons and the logic of why you do this. And the other benefit is that in similar situations later on, you'll be able to use the same logic, and also you'll be able to see when you shouldn't hit with the 5-2, when you should do something else. You'll see that the logic that you use in this particular situation doesn't apply for other second roll situations. Now, I mentioned how strong it is that blue has this anchor on the 9 point. It's not as good an anchor here, and it's not as important to stop him and make a tempo, what we call this is a tempo hit, to hit him in a place where you're really hitting to prevent him from doing things. It's not as important either here or here. However, we can see that extreme gammon is going to tell us to make the same play. It still hits. The difference is much, much smaller, 0.008. And here, the difference is really close. It's like a toss-up of what play you make. You can do this play. Why? Because now coming up, this checker is not directly threatened by this checker as he would be here. So you can come up a little bit more safely, and it isn't important. So you can flip a coin according to XG in this position, and in this position you're back to making the hit again as being better than stacking and coming down, because there are some good numbers that can be, this checker can be used. The 4s that help make this point and the 6s that help make this point are a little bit more productive for him. So why do we spend so much time? Books have been written on the opening roll and the early game play, most recently by Knack Ballard and Paul Weaver, and many, many articles, and much study has been done, and many, 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 many people have rolled it out. This position has been rolled out, where is it, 31,000 times by Stephen Carey, who's done many rollouts along with Neil Kazaros and David Rockwell and others. It's because it's really important to get a good start, and if you make a small error at the beginning of the game, in the early game, you're going to make that error over and over and over and over. Playing in the early game is like putting in a foundation for a house. If you start out wrong, it starts getting worse and worse and builds on itself. So it's worth taking the time to study these things, understand them, and play them correctly. I hope this gives you some additional understanding and into the early game play. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.